Here's a question for you. What do the companies AbbVie, Medtronic, Liberty Global, and Burger King all have in common? They've recently begun or completed a purchase of a foreign company to relocate their headquarters abroad and thereby avoid paying U.S. corporate income tax. As a result, the U.S. stands to lose out on billions of dollars in much-needed tax revenue. So in August, the Obama administration announced it was considering executive action to curb these corporate inversions. But the best way to do that is far from clear. Welcome to Tuck Faculty Insights. I'm Kirk Kardashian, a senior writer at the Tuck School of Business. I'm here today with Tuck professor and tax expert Leslie Robinson. Professor Robinson is going to help us get a better understanding of corporate inversions and what the U.S. might do to keep them at bay. Leslie Robinson, thank you for joining us today. In July, you testified before the Senate Finance Committee about corporate inversions, something that Congress seems to be worried about these days. What is a corporate inversion and why are companies doing them?
Sure. So a corporate inversion is essentially a restructuring of the ownership of a U.S. multinational. So a U.S. multinational has a U.S. parent sitting at the top with a number of foreign subsidiaries underneath of it. And a corporate inversion is where the group, after the inversion takes place, is owned by a foreign company. So the U.S. Parent will essentially sit underneath of a foreign company. And that's the definition of an inversion. Why are companies doing them? They're doing them primarily for tax benefits. They're seeking tax benefits. And the primary tax benefit is that by being resident in a foreign country, a tax resident in a foreign country, the non-U.S. earnings of the foreign subsidiaries will not be included in the U.S. tax base, whereas as currently they are. They're also able to more easily use their foreign cash balances after the inversion. So it makes their ability to use that cash more flexible. So that's a secondary reason for doing them.
So companies are doing this to get some tax relief, to free up some cash. Obviously, this is not good for American tax revenue, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is Congress worried about here?
Well, they're worried about three things primarily, and the first two relate directly to the loss of tax revenue. So, again, I mentioned that any foreign earnings or non-U.S. earnings generated in the future will not be included in the U.S. tax base. So there is that direct revenue loss from the U.S. perspective. There's also concern based on how firms have behaved post-inversion in the past. There's also some concern of shifting income out of the U.S. into foreign countries, sort of increasing after the transactions. Foreign companies are more easily able to use U.S. interest deductions to lower their U.S. Tax liability than are U.S. firms, and the rules are really simply too weak to stop that. So that's really the second concern, is that after the inversion, the foreign parent will shift U.S. income out and into a lower tax country. The last concern is really just the potential loss of U.S. jobs and maybe the movement of real activities or assets out of the U.S.
So what do you think the government can do about this or should do to reform the system?
Sure. So this was the topic of the Senate Finance Committee hearing in particular. There are really two options. One is fundamental corporate tax reform. And the other one is really sort of trying to specifically target these transactions and block them by putting in stopgap provisions, essentially, in the tax law or the regulations. And, one of the things that's not really clear is to the extent we should focus on sort of blocking these transactions or focus on solving the underlying problem, which of course will take much longer. In the current political environment, I think it's a little difficult because we can't agree on exactly what to do. One of the proposals, for instance, that's come up to block inversions in the shorter term is to For instance, to require, one of the current requirements is that U.S. shareholders cannot own more than 80% of the new company, or else the inversion is not considered complete or successful from the U.S. standpoint. There's some talk of lowering that to 50%. So the U.S. shareholders cannot own more than 50% of the newly combined entity. That's one of the things that Obama's proposed. Now, things like this concern me because what you're doing is you're essentially giving a greater ownership percentage or requiring a higher ownership percentage from the merger partner. And what that's going to do is it's going to push these transactions to look more like a large U.S. firm purchasing a large foreign firm. So corporate governance is going to change potentially, and the interests of the foreign merger partner may not be, or may be at odds with the U.S. So there are some proposals on the table, but I think they concern me, and I sort of hope that we focus on fundamental tax reform, as I mentioned in my testimony.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Something to watch out for.
For sure.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.